Hi, I'm Steve Alm. I'm the Honolulu prosecutor. I'm born and raised in Hawaii. I retired and I came back because of all the problems at the Honolulu prosecutor's office. And I really love working with communities to try to make them safer and better for people to live. I was invited by Chris to the event, Hope Awareness event last year. And I've learned that Project Nehemiah, Chris's passion, really aligns with mine and what we try to do at the Honolulu prosecutor's office. And that means trying to work on human trafficking, domestic violence, homelessness, drugs and alcohol, game rooms. It runs the gamut. It's just trying to make communities safer and better. And their vision and our vision is a real close match. Well, as the Honolulu prosecutor, my jurisdiction is all over the island. And so it's meeting with community members, it's explaining some of what we do, because things like human trafficking, the public really doesn't know anything about it unless it affects their family. And then it's a horrible situation. Otherwise, they really don't know it exists. So that's one of the things to talk about. We also are involved in prosecuting cases in domestic violence. We've made it a much more victim-centered approach. We support efforts to help reduce the homeless population and deal with drugs and alcohol. So I have many things to talk to the community about. Partly, it's to educate about things like trafficking, but it's also to explain we do have strategies that work to help people with mental health and drug and alcohol problems. So part of it's education, a part of it's just talking story with people so they know what we can help people. I think it's a great idea. And in fact, at the luau I was just at, that Chris hosted, one of the speakers said, if all the churches got together, it would be an unstoppable force on the West Side. And so I would be happy to participate in that, but getting all the churches together from all over the West Side and agreeing to speak as a voice and come together. They're all individuals. They may do their own neighborhood security watches and do other activities to help make the community safer and stronger. But at certain times, coming together to show their strength in numbers and commitment, I think would be a good idea. So they would certainly take the lead, but if we could assist in any way, I'd be happy to do that. Well, one of the things we've done is working with the hotels in Waikiki, and training has gone on to help them identify human trafficking when it's taking place. Because if you have a middle-aged guy with a young girl and they do not appear to be related, questions should be asked. And they are much more attuned to it. And because we have a huge visitor industry, that's where a lot of the trafficking takes place. And if they can be on the lookout for it, they can contact the human trafficking hotline and get law enforcement down there asking questions. Because at any hotel, somebody staying at a hotel, they run into so many people who work for the hotel that they can be a real big help. But it's seeing something, it's asking questions. But a number of kids are put into trafficking by their own families. So I think it's really calling on people, take care of your kids. Don't do this to them. And if enough peer pressure from the community can get involved, that can be helpful. I think the schools becoming aware of it, so if they see signs, that's helpful. We have a team of deputy prosecutors who go to all of the schools on the West Side, Kapolei, Ewa, Pearl City, trying to talk to the kids and educate the kids about things. That's one of the things they talk about. Well, often the pimps will have a party, be involved in parties. And they'll give high school boys or middle school boys money to invite teenage girls to the parties. And then this older guy will start paying attention to them and flatter them and start to try to date them. And then before too long, they traffic them into the sex trade industry. They also troll through the malls. And as one of them said, I'll go up to 3 teenage girls together and I'll compliment them. And the ones that say, yeah, confident, he ignores them. But the girl who looks at her shoes and says, no, I'm not pretty and stuff, he thinks that's the one I'm going to go after. because her self-esteem is not so good. I can compliment her. I can get her involved in it. And where our office can come into it is some of the girls, when they get out of that, and it isn't girls, it's about 3/4 girls, I think 1/4 boys, but many of them just want to get out of the life and not have to revisit it, not go back to that world. And that's fine. It's whatever they want to do. But if they're willing to testify, we will prosecute them. And a couple of years ago, we prosecuted a pimp named Marquise Green, and his 2 victims were now in their 20s. He had been in jail for years, kept firing his attorney, and I think he was trying to outlast those 2 girls, now women, in hopes that they'd give up. They didn't. They both testified, they looked him in the eye, they identified him, the jury convicted him. We asked for consecutive sentences, so the judge gave him 40 years in prison. And we want to try to publicize that if you're a pimp, and we want to make Hawaii an inhospitable place for you, we will try to send you to prison. And we work very closely with both Susanna Wesley and Ho'olunapua to try to help them in their efforts to help kids get out of this trafficking situation and be able to live their life again. Yeah, it's a real challenge, and I think all the law enforcement folks need to become educated about what this situation is. We need to talk to the schools so they can be educated. We need to work with, and the churches could probably play a good role here too, because they touch so many lives. And if they could educate the members about this, to keep an eye out. And I think the runaway teenage girls are probably the most vulnerable group, because they're going to need help. They don't have support. If somebody pays attention to them and helps them, they may feel kindly toward them. And that's a hard thing to do, because sometimes kids running away from home are running away because of what's going on in the home. They may be getting assaulted. They may be getting sexually assaulted. So it's making our families as strong as possible will help. But part of it is talking to reporters, trying to get them to do stories about this so people can learn what a big problem this is and why it isn't just, kids from the mainland being brought over here to do it. It's local kids, sometimes by the family, sometimes by a pimp they meet, getting involved in the trafficking, and it can really hurt their lives. So that whatever we can do in all these different ways, I think would be extremely helpful. We absolutely will prosecute, and if they would see a police officer and they want to get away from their pimp, go up and tell them, you're being a victim, you're being victimized. And usually what we end up doing is usually sex assault statutes or a sex trafficking statute. And it's typically several years is what the statute of limitations is. But often this is happening as we speak. So that is usually not the biggest problem, the statute of limitations. But again, we leave it up to the individual, teen, and partly it's educating the public. There's no such thing as a 13-year-old prostitute. There's a 13-year-old rape victim, and that's what they're suffering from. And that's why programs that can help them, like Ho'olunapua, because a regular foster home is usually not equipped to deal with somebody who's been raped several times a day for, like you say, 4 years. They need more help than that. And Ho'olunapua does have a place called Pearl Haven, a residential community with counseling, with education, just helping girls get back, it's limited to girls, back on their feet and stay away from that life and develop self-esteem so they can want to have a good life on their own. But if anybody's willing to testify, we are happy to do that, because sending pimps to prison and getting it publicized can help to keep other pimps away. Right. Our deputies, we have a sex assault team, and the head of that team, Rochelle Vedina, is also the chair of the Honolulu task force dealing with this. They work with HPD officers, sometimes with federal officers. And like I say, Susanna Wesley is very good. Ho'olulupu is good. We're trying to work with both of them. We will try to help them get housing and a place to stay and work with them on doing the case and working up the case. But if they don't want to testify, we're never going to force somebody, or pressure them into testifying. That's got to be their choice. But if they are willing to testify, we are happy to do those cases because we need to hold these folks accountable. What they're doing is sickening, and they're really bad people, and so they need to go to prison. It is absolutely happening. Sex trafficking, human trafficking with adults, it is absolutely happening right now. And that Marquise Green case is a good example because of the, sex assault with a minor. That's why we were able to charge these Class A felonies, 20 years in prison. He was convicted. They were willing to testify. We were able to run the two of the 20-year sentences consecutive, which is why he got 40 years. But partly, as you say, it's going to take repetition. I think drunk driving is a good example. MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Years ago, there were pauhana parties. You'd see people drinking after work, whether it's a construction site or other places. It was just a given. And they really pushed this and got people's attention on it and got designated drivers, and now keep publicizing their Ubers, their Lyfts, their taxis, their designated drivers, and getting people to change that it's not cool to be out there drinking in public and then driving. So partly this is going to be a years-long effort, and I'm committed to speaking out. And when I speak, I do a lot of public speaking. I will talk about this as an issue. We'll try to get the other law enforcement folks to do it, but it's also trying to get the schools to allow our folks to come in or do their own programs just to educate the kids. And you probably have to do it at middle school because that's when they're going to start to get approached. High school is a little late. It's still better than nothing, but it's getting kids there to understand. If somebody invites you to a party and an older guy is hitting on you, you got to be aware. You could end up becoming sex trafficked by that person. It's not normal. It's not natural for a 40-year-old man to be trying to hit on a 15-year-old girl. And, when people's self-esteem is low, they maybe appreciate the attention. We've got to try to help make our kids as safe and healthy as possible, but also educate them so they can protect themselves if put into that situation. But part of it is keeping it constantly, talking to reporters about it, saying this is a story worth doing, and educating people, because we have to keep this up until the public really understands that this is going on now and it's happening to our local kids, and we've got to try to stop it. I'm not aware of that situation, so I can't. I don't talk about stuff I don't know about, but I am committed in the next 4 years to have our office actively engaged with all of the West Side. And we're going to do a lot more. And when you're actively engaged like that, we will hear stuff. People will start telling us stuff. We want to do a lot of things to help make the community safer. So it's getting information. It's working closely with HPD to do this. We have developed a great relationship with Major Mike Lambert, who's head of Narcotics Vice. I have assigned a seasoned deputy prosecutor full-time to work on game rooms. They're doing gambling. They're doing nuisance abatement, working together with Major Lambert. According to him, 60 game rooms have been closed in the last year. We will keep trying to do that because those places can be magnets for crime. There are robberies there. In some of them, it's drugs, it's guns. And people that are going to rob a game room really don't care because they know there's going to be security, maybe armed, maybe not. They may be connected to organized crime. But we got some low people that don't care. And so we're working together with Major Lambert in trying to shut down as many places as we can. But I am committed with this office for the next 4 years to be spending a lot more resources and a lot more energy on the West Side. And I think it's an area that has been neglected for too long. It deserves to get the proper amount of attention. And most people on the West Side are honest, hardworking. They're sick and tired of the crooks giving the area a bad name. So I'm really excited about working with the churches, working with the police, working with community members to try to address trafficking, drug use, domestic violence, and all sorts of other problems, in particular on the West Side. And I think when you work with a community like that and there's trust level, they will give information anonymously. They're not going to get called to testify, but it gives information to the police that they can then take action on. When I was the United States Attorney 25 years ago, we started Weed and Seed in Chinatown and Kali'ipalama, and over 4 years, it reduced crime by 70% in Chinatown and Kali'ipalama. At the same time, we opened up a Head Start program, an after-school sports program for kids at Kaiulani Elementary School. They put speed humps on Poor Lane so people wouldn't speed between King Street and Vineyard, so people would let their kids play outside. And then subsequent efforts were started in Waipahu and in Eva Beach. And the most recent one is Safe and Sound Waikiki, where crime has been reduced by double digits. When the community starts getting safer and people then see the police as kind of their allies in cleaning up the area, they tend to give a lot of information. And so a lot of people who are homeless, they lost their jobs. They may have mental health issues. Some may have drug and alcohol issues. We will try to work with folks to give them help. And I think the police, getting involved with the police on a much more focused area, I think they will be able to start getting information from residents, homeless and otherwise, that will help us address all of those problems. I think it's great. And I was invited last December to Christmas on the Avenue, and I walked with Pastor Cardenas, and I saw so many folks that I had known from Hope Probation that came up to me and talked about how their life was helped, they were doing so much better. But the police also had Blue Light Christmas, where they had donated gifts, they're giving it away to little kids and showing that they're human beings, they're friendly, they're trying to help out. I think the police force has got to be representing the community they're in. I think they're trying to do that. They're trying to increase. They need more people, so they're offering, essentially signing bonuses for more people to join the department, and then they can help keep it safe. I know when we started doing Weed and Seed, the core of it was Mayor Wright Holmes. And when it started, they kind of saw the police as somebody who's the enemy, somebody who had arrested their uncle or brother or sister. After a few years of really getting to know the police officers, they got to see them as somebody who's helping keep the place safe. So after 4 years, people were sleeping on their mats outside again. There was virtually no crime at Mayor Wright's. It really turned the whole area around. And like I said, 70% reduction in crime. When the crime is reduced, people will participate in community activities. They won't be afraid to go outside. So one helps the other. Weed and Seed, Safe and Sound. You can really help communities. Okay. When I got assigned to a felony trial courtroom as a judge in 2004, the first week I'd see motions to revoke probation with 20, 30, 40 violations. And finally, the probation, with no sanctions in between. And probation officers would finally give up on the person and think they're a danger to society, write up all the violations, refer them back to court, and essentially ask the judge to send the person to prison for 5 or 10 years. And I know we have caring probation officers, there's social workers from UH, but they didn't have a mechanism. They didn't have anything in between talking to the guy or trying to get him 5 or 10 years in prison. And so I thought, how do we raise our kids? How were we raised? Your parents tell you they care about you, but if you do something wrong, they did something about it immediately. And that helped you tie together a bad behavior with a consequence and learn from it. And I figured some of the guys in court maybe weren't raised in families where they had that kind of structure and caring. There may have been consequences, but not swift, certain, consistent, and proportionate. And so the whole idea was that it's like parenting 101. And so that's how we started it. We brought folks into court. And the first words out of my mouth were, everybody in this courtroom wants you to succeed on probation. But a lot of you haven't been following the rules. So from now on, you're going to get typically a short jail sanction for every violation. But I can't control what you do, but I can control what I'm going to do. And that means if you test positive for drugs, and I'd ask, Mr. Smith, if you used, what do you do on regular probation? You come in or you stay away? I stay away. Well, in this program, I want you to come in, because if you come in and admit to it, and test positive and admit to it, you're going to get 2 days in jail. If you test positive and deny it and say, oh, it must be something wrong with that test cup or something, we'll send it to the lab. But if the lab confirms it, I'm going to give you 15 days in jail. I'll let you do it on 5 weekends if you're working or in school or job training. If you run away and HPD has to look for you, you're going to get 30 days. And if that happens repeatedly, you're going to halava, because it shows you're just not ready to do probation. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. You're just not ready to do probation. And I'd ask each person, when's the last time you used? And they'd say 3 months ago. I said, are you in treatment? No. I say, fine, you don't need to go to treatment. You don't need to do an assessment, but I expect you to come in and test clean every time if you're not using. And they thought that was really fair. So we started HOPE in 2004. We got great results from the very beginning. Over the next year, they tested positive for drugs 90% less often in HOPE than in regular probation. They missed probation officer appointments about 85% less often. We started with no extra money, no publicity, just everybody working together to help people succeed on probation. And after 15 months, we went to the legislature. They gave us some money. We used most of it for drug treatment. And we kept adding people to HOPE probation. And I would talk to them. I would encourage them. They all know I care about them and I want them to succeed, but there are going to be consequences for bad behavior. And so we started getting visitors from all over the country, because every state has lots of people on probation. And if states try to reduce their prison population, those folks aren't going to disappear. They're all going to be on probation. So you want to make probation successful. And especially for women. Women are almost never sent to prison, out at the women's facility at original sentencing, because women don't tend to commit the violent crimes that require prison. Armed robbery, manslaughter, sex assault in the first degree. Men do that more. But women get on probation and they failed it in large numbers, often for drug use. Often their boyfriends are involved in drug use. And that gets them going to state prison. And so we started with just one court with me. It eventually went to the other judges. Over the years, something like 34 states started their own versions of this. I went to many of these places to help them learn how to do it. The ones that worked with us and called us or visited us set up successful programs. Other places tried to look at the internet and do it on their own. Often they didn't have the caring component. HOPE is really three-part, like a three-legged stool. You need probation officers that care about the clients and want to work with them. You need a judge who knows something about addiction, but who cares and wants people to succeed. And then you have to have a sanctions component that is swift, certain, consistent, and proportionate. If you have all three of those, you're going to have a successful probation system, a successful HOPE system. And what I have found so gratifying about this is when I left the bench, I was supervising about 2,200 people on felony probation. They would stop me at Costco. They'd stop me at Long's Drugs. Hey, you're Judge Alms, right? I'm wearing a, T-shirt and shorts. And yeah, that's me. And my wife would get such a kick out of this, because they'd say, you saved my life. And I'd say, you saved your own life. I was just there to help. It happens to this day. And I've been off the bench for 8 years. And it most recently happened this morning. I was across from Kalani High School doing sign waving for my re-election as Honolulu prosecutor to get the East Honolulu folks who are coming in. For the last month, we've gone to a different location 3 times a week. And this guy stopped me in his truck And I went over and he said, you saved my life in Hope Probation. You gave me many chances. I really appreciate you. And I've got all my kids back with me. You know, it always, you know, really touches me when people take the time to stop and tell me that, because we helped them to succeed on probation. And that kept them out of prison. They could get a job. They could take care of their family. It's something I'm just so pleased about. Unfortunately, when COVID hit, that put a real hurt on it being done the right way by the judiciary. And it has stayed not a real hope program since then. We are now working with the judiciary to get it started again, because we have statistics from Pepperdine and UCLA showing that people in hope do so much better on probation and avoid going to prison. For example, Native Hawaiians on hope get revoked and sent to prison 42% less often if they're in hope than in regular probation. And we're talking hundreds of people, because we had about 2,500 in hope. Women fail at probation and go to prison 50% less often if they're in hope probation. So we've got to get this going again. This is something that can really help people, provide some structure to their lives. They're the ones making the better choices. And it's really hard to change. And, you know, you got to change their thinking to change their behavior. That's a really hard thing to do. But we have good probation officers here. They're caring. We have judges that are caring. But you have to have a system, a model that is seen as fair. Hope changed my whole view of discretion, because I knew RPOs cared. I knew the judges cared. But from a defendant's standpoint, if I'm treated differently from my friend and we did the same thing, like smoke meth yesterday, that's unfair. The PO is prejudiced or the judge is a jerk. You know, if you treat people fairly, you tell them what the consequences are, they can make their own choices, they will respond to it. So let me just give you one example. A guy came in and he had tested positive. He denied it. They let him go. And then we sent it to the lab. Lab came back confirmed for methamphetamine. So when he came into court, I said, you know, Mr. X, how come you denied it? How come you lied about it? Because you were here 6 months ago and you admitted it and you only got 2 days in jail. This time you lied about it. So what happened? He goes, well, my mother was going to get evicted the next day. So I knew how hope works. I knew if I admitted it, I'd get 2 days in jail. But then I couldn't help my mom when she got evicted. So I lied about it, knowing I'd have to get the 15 later. I said, okay, in the moment, I can understand why you thought that way, but how could you have avoided that whole decision-making problem to begin with? And he looks at me and he goes, not used. I said, exactly. So, you know, changing people's thinking is really difficult, and getting them to be honest and look at their choices, because all of our choices as adults have consequences. But we set up a system where they're treated fairly. And the most telling example of that I did tens of thousands of these hearings when I was still a judge, hope hearings. I only had about 35 contested hearings where the person was saying it wasn't true or I didn't do it. The way most people who failed, and there were some who failed, was they ran away too often. They absconded too often. And I would tell them, HPD and the sheriffs and the U.S. Marshals can either look for you, or they can be patrolling your family's neighborhood, my family's neighborhood, maybe keeping our houses from getting burglarized, keeping your sister from getting assaulted, but they can't do both. So you got to stop running away. And so like the fourth time or the fifth, I tell them, if you run away again, you're going to Halava. And every once in a while, one of these knuckleheads would come into court. They'd be kind of sheepish, and it would be like, Judge Alm, send me up the valley. You warned me. And I'd do it. And so they admitted to it, even knowing they were going to prison. But that's really that was the way. If somebody failed and I sent them to prison, or if they committed a new violent felony, then I'd give them the open term. I would never send somebody to prison for positive drug tests or trouble in treatment or whatever. They might get a short jail sanction at OCCC, but I would never send them to prison. I realize it's hard to stop using drugs. You know, people need second chances, third chances, fourth chances. There's always a consequence, but it wouldn't be prison. So I'm really passionate about hope because it helps so many people to avoid going to prison, because I can't think of anything that would drive a family into poverty faster than especially mom or dad going to prison. It also normalizes it for the kids so that it makes them more likely to end up in prison themselves. So we will be making an effort. I'm thrilled to hear it when people have positive stories about hope. We knew how to do it right here. Some places across the country did it right. Others didn't. They just focused on the sanctions. And you got to have a caring environment where you treat people like adults, lay out what the consequences are, follow it, don't over-threaten, be consistent, and people respond to that.